So Jon Jones has been tweeting up a storm of late. This is the Battle Camp. My name is Rahul J-Chan. Thank you very much for joining me. I feel like I make a video about this every 3 or 4 months. So every quarter I like to sit here and talk about Jon Jones and his tweeting habits. And generally speaking, his tweeting habits are all based off of his discrepancies with the UFCs and his grievances that he has with how he's been treated. And this is obviously the same. And just in a nutshell, the way I kind of feel is I totally agree and understand Jon Jones's position. I feel like he's justified in wanting to be paid what he believes his value is. And I need to be careful when I say that, and I'll go into more detail about that shortly. But I don't know whether I think he's going the right way about it. So let me qualify that. So previously, a few months ago, when DC was booked to fight Stipe, Jon Jones announced, I'm going to heavyweight and I'm going to have a super fight with Francis Ngannou. I don't know if you guys remember that. And at the time, I made a video about that statement and just me saying I don't really think it's a super fight because Francis Ngannou isn't the champion. It doesn't really have the same cash. Like I feel like if something's a super fight, it needs everything. There's certain things that need to fall into place. The timing of the fight, the people involved in the fight, kind of, are they big names, and just the general intrigue and just the excitement around the fight. And I didn't feel that it kind of ticked all of the boxes for it to be a super fight at that time. Having said that, given how Francis Ngannou performed on Saturday night and the hype around that performance and him as an individual and a fighter, and rightly so, given the fact that Jon Jones is you can still say he's the unofficial light heavyweight champion because he gave up his belt. He was never beaten for that title. And the fact that you'd find it very difficult to argue against calling Jon Jones the pound for pound best active fighter in the UFC and by proxy the world, now that Khabib has retired, right? So you've got basically the best fighter in the world, who is a champion because he didn't really lose his belt, stepping up to face the heavyweight champion of the world, a man that's considerably better than him, a man that has shown just how much he's improved and how good he is, a real test for both men. For me now, this is a super fight, right? So congratulations. We've got all of the ingredients we needed for a super fight, in my humble opinion. Now, I'm just sat here now looking at the top 10 highest grossing UFC pay-per-views. And I don't know how accurate this is because it could be a load of nonsense. But for the sake of this video, we'll say that these numbers are correct. And looking at this list of top 10 grossing fights, it's literally just a list of Conor McGregor fights, right? There's 3 fights in here that are not Conor McGregor fights, and they're Usman vs Masvidal at number 7, 1.3 million buys. Lesnar against Carwin, 1.16, and Nunes against Rousey, 1.1. So that's number 10, 9, and 7. The rest are all Conor McGregor fights, right? The highest grossing fight is Khabib against McGregor, which was 2.4 million buys. Given the way things are trending right now in the UFC, and I'll include, and when I say that, I'm referring also to the Usman Masvidal fight being kind of 2 names that aren't necessarily huge, humongous names, but the ingredients were right, the circumstances were right at the start of the pandemic, and nothing really was going on, and this was a big fight that got everyone's attention, and it got the buys. It got a lot of buys, right? I feel like this fight could do kind of above 1.5 million, close to kind of between the 1.5 and say 1.8 bracket. And if it does that, it could be anywhere from the second highest ever grossing pay-per-view to the 4th, right? And that's a big deal for the UFC. So why aren't they willing to pay Jon Jones what he believes he's worth? Now, so look, I don't know what Jon Jones currently earns. I don't know how many fights he has left on his deal. And I don't know the number that he's floating out there and what the UFC are saying, no, this is what we're going to pay, right? So there's so many details that we don't know collectively. What I do know is, and I hate talking about this because it opens up a whole new can of worms, we do know that the UFC, in comparison to other sports leagues, pay their athletes a lower percentage than other sports teams, leagues, etc. pay their athletes. So in a roundabout way, the UFC fighters are underpaid. But why wouldn't the UFC be willing to pay Jon Jones pay Jon Jones a sort of kind of ballpark figures that they pay Conor McGregor? Because I think we all can agree that Conor McGregor is well paid by the UFC. Now, even he might not be paid what he deserves, or is kind of like, if we compare what boxers of his stature earn, maybe Conor McGregor is even underpaid, right? But the way the framework is at the moment, the way things are at the moment, I think it's fair to say that Conor McGregor is paid well for a UFC fighter. The only thing that I can think of is, generally speaking, when Conor McGregor fights, his opponent doesn't make the same sort of money that he makes. And if Jon Jones goes up to fight Francis Ngannou, maybe the thought process for the UFC is, well, look, if we give Jon Jones this, we're going to have to give Francis this, and we don't want to give them this money. Another issue that I think about is, if you look at what the UFC have got lined up in the next few months, they've got some big fights already booked. They've already got, it looks like, Conor McGregor against Dustin Poirier in July. They've already got Masvidal against Usman in April, I believe. You'd assume Israel Adesanya is going to come back and fight again. If Conor McGregor wins in July, you'd assume he'd fight again by the end of the year. So what I'm trying to say is, from the UFC standpoint, they've got a strong lineup of events, over the kind of the summer period and going into autumn and winter. So they're forecasting probably big numbers already. So why do we need to add to our costs? We don't really desperately need a Jon Jones and Ngannou fight. This is just me speculating, obviously. Having said all of that, like I said earlier, I still feel like this is a big, like, from a fan's point of view, if you were to give me a list of fights that could potentially be made in the UFC, this is probably the one that I'd be most excited about watching. Jon Jones against Francis Ngannou against Jon Jones. So, like I say, I feel Jon Jones is justified in wanting to be paid more money, depending on what it is that he wants and what it is that he currently makes, and what it is that the UFC are willing to offer him. But, and comparing this all to boxing, looking at the kind of the pay-per-view market in boxing at the moment in the States, I think recently Tyson Fury against Wilder 2 did over 1 million buys or something. I don't know, but like, the numbers aren't really that strong when it comes to boxing, and these boxers seem to be earning millions of dollars every time they go out there and perform. So I totally understand Jon Jones's point of view. Just this tweeting stuff, and I don't know whether it's related, but I feel like Malky Kawa and his brother Abraham Kawa, what they call first round management, I feel like their fighters do this on a regular basis. It's their default kind of bargaining stance. Let me go on Twitter and start showing how angry I am. And I don't know whether this kind of, like, because I've kind of just explained to you kind of what I feel like the UFC's position might be, and why they might not be that desperate to see Jon Jones fight again, or kind of make this fight, right? Because you get times where the UFC are desperate, they need a big fight, and they're willing to kind of push the boat out. Masvidal against Usman the first time around is an example of that, because Masvidal was doing the same thing, tweeting up a storm, talking about how he's not happy with the UFC and the pay that they're willing to pay him and this, that and the other. And then lo and behold, Gilbert Burns falls out and Masvidal's replacing him with a week's notice. And so clearly he got close to what he wanted to come in and fill that gap. And like, I just like this tweeting stuff. I've never seen it really work. I've never seen it really work. And it just feels like it just kind of, it breaks the relationship that is there. But then, like, what else can you do? Like, I feel like things would get mediated in a better way, and it would be a more constructive discourse if things weren't just thrown around on Twitter. But it might just be his last resort. They might have tried and failed and tried and failed, and this is all he has left. But whichever way you look at it, it's a mess, right? All of this tweeting and deleting stuff, like just today, Jon Jones was talking about, oh, just cut me, release me, let me go. I feel like a bird whose wings have been clipped and stuff like that. Fucking hell, man. Like, we know it's not going to happen, innit? We know it's not. So, and also delete. Why would you delete a tweet? Like, it's not like you're not me with like 30 followers. Do you know what I mean? Like, no one really like checks for your tweets and that. You're Jon Jones. Like, you've got millions of followers, I'd assume, or hundreds of thousands at least. So it's just it's a mess, man. It's a mess. And I sympathize with Jon Jones and the position that he's in, but at the same time, like, I can't see him winning this battle. I can't see him winning this battle, especially now that he's gone so public with things. And like I say, it feels like it's a pattern for these Kawa fighters, Kawa, however you pronounce it. But yeah, I mean, there's not really much else to say. It'd be interesting to see how this kind of unfolds, because I mean, the other option that the UFC have is Derek Lewis, and it's just a case of this kind of like, all right, Lewis against Ngannou is going to cost how much, and how much money are they going to bring in, right? Compared to Jon Jones against Ngannou, it's going to cost how much, and how much money are they going to bring in? Are the UFC cutting their nose off to spite their face? Do you know what I mean? Like, if they just paid Jon Jones what he wants and paid Francis Ngannou for the fight, are they going to make exponentially more money for this fight? And Francis Ngannou is only one human being. He can only fight every, 3, 4, 5 months or whatever it is. So every time you have him fight someone, you're punching a hole in that ticket, right? Because time does progress. So why not make the most out of the situation you're in? Because either way, you're getting a star at the end of it. If Jon Jones wins, you know, this is the greatest fighter that's ever breathed. And if Ngannou wins, wow, who's next? Like, do you understand what I'm trying to say? So it just feels like a mixture of a battle of ego, greed from the UFC standpoint, and just not a very calculated moves on Jon Jones's part. And for me as a fan, I'd hate for this fight to not happen, because those three things are in place, and the UFC and Jon Jones just couldn't reconcile things enough to get this fight over the line. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. Please don't be scared to hit the like button, share this with a friend if you've enjoyed it, put your comments below, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I will catch you guys next time.